That's the sound, isn't it? That's the sound that everyone loves. And that is the sound of my happy place. In the comments of many Formula One YouTube videos comparing sounds from different eras or just, videos of F1 races in general, why is the V10 from the early 2000s a consistent fan favorite, followed by the V12 at a close second? Why is the current generation V6 consistently the least inspiring sound to most people? Now, to many people, this is already going to be obvious. You just listen to it. Your ears tell you what's the best sound. But in this video, I'm going to explain how we can use music theory to support the proposition that the V10 engine is indeed the best sounding engine of all time. Many people miss the sounds. They have a nostalgia for the naturally aspirated sounds of the F1 motors of days past. There's a universal love for that classic F1 sound. When I was a kid, I would watch races with my dad on TV, and when I was a teenager, I was exposed to the sound of that V10. I was never not awestruck at the pure, raw, impossibly intense sound of an F1 engine every time one would come screaming across the screen. Now you say, what can music theory possibly tell us about F1 engines? To most people, it'll be obvious why the V10 sounds the best, right? It's freaking loud, it's super high-pitched, and it just sounds like nothing you've ever experienced, especially compared to modern F1 engines. And I say you're right, the engines simply sound awesome. But the rabbit hole goes much, much deeper than that. But before we get any further, we need a little refresher on harmonic theory, specifically the harmonic series, which in short is basically the foundation upon which human music was built. Now, if you're a musician that knows all about harmonic theory, feel free to skip ahead, but if you're not too familiar with music theory, or if you'd like a refresher, what I'm about to explain is very important. Starting from a big picture, you can think of the harmonic series in music as a series of notes characterized by certain intervals, or spatial relationships that work well together, that are naturally stable. Defined more precisely, it is an arithmetic series of notes with respect to a fundamental or a root note, you can say, or you can also say a specific frequency that is comprised of all integer multiples of that frequency, starting with 1 times the frequency, then 2 or double that frequency, then 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Another way to think about it is that you can derive the harmonic series by multiplying the wavelength of a sound by 1 over x for every positive integer of x starting with 1. Okay, let's explore the first few notes in the harmonic series on the keyboard, starting with a constant C. So starting from C, the next note in the series you get is another C, an octave above that. The third note that comes in the series is a G, which is a fifth above the C. This is a fifth. After the G, you get another C, which is a fourth above the G. And after this C, you get an E, which is a third above the C. And this is a major third. This is basically the happy interval. It is what makes major chords major, as opposed to minor. Now, with just the first few notes in the series, you get Does that sound familiar? And by the way, by moving in intervals of fourths or fifths, you can derive every note in Western music. So the fourth and the fifth, this is powerful stuff, and the fundamental heart of how we feel harmony. Why do you think they call them power chords? Footnote. Now, I should say that the intervals on a piano are not actually perfectly aligned with the harmonic series. The pitch of each note in the harmonic series as represented on the piano is slightly off because the instrument is tuned using a technique called equal temperament, meaning imperfections are introduced to each key signature on the keyboard as a sort of compromise such that any song played in any key sounds more or less okay to the human ear, hence the well-tempered clavier. But that's a discussion for another video. So what we have on the piano is a close enough approximation of the intervals we find in the harmonic series. Moving on. The next new note we arrive at in the series is either an A or a B flat. It is actually somewhere in between. Some musical cultures gravitate toward A, some to B flat. Now we have the notes that make up the pentatonic scale. Now, with the pentatonic scale, you're now into all sorts of musical shenanigans. Now that we understand the building blocks of harmony, why don't we take a listen to some F1 engine sounds? So for the purposes of our analysis, we're going to use onboard recordings to avoid difficulties introduced by the Doppler effect. So I've extracted these audio recordings from videos. One is of the current Gen V6, here in the red. One is from 1995, that's a V12. And one from 2004, the V10. So I've routed each audio track into the mixer, into separate tracks in the mixer so that we can solo each one and compare them easily. I've also adjusted the volume here of each one so that they're more or less playing on the same footing. And lastly, I added a bit of an EQ, it's sort of a high and low pass filter here just to get rid of some of the artifacts from the recording that aren't really adding to the sound of the engine, that, they're just from the bad video quality. So, as an example, this rumble, that's not actually the car, it's just, that's just from the video. Let's start, how about, with the current gen V6. This is from Lewis Hamilton's pole lap in France in 2018. Here, why don't we take a listen? Okay, at the top of the rev range there, right before he shifts, I hear the most prominent note as a concert D. I hear a D, this one. Let's see if I can play it on the keyboard. Oh wait, I have this soloed. So it's this. In the recording it's a few cents flat of this, but it's closest to this. I also hear a G above that. This would make it a fourth. See if you can hear it. Here, let's solo this track again. So yeah, that would be a fourth. That's pretty neat. Now let's take a listen to the V12. This is an onboard recording of Ayrton Senna from 1995 at Suzuka. So I think I hear a B here, something between a B and a B flat. Yeah, maybe closer to a B flat here at the top of the rev range, but I think it's in between. And above that I hear an F sharp. Let's listen to it again here. It's closer to a B flat and an F. And this is a fifth, so that's pretty neat. So here's a challenge. Try doing the same for the V8 and let me know what you hear. But for now, let's go to the V10. Let's take a listen. This is from Schumacher's 2004 pole app in Australia, by the way. So I hear an E flat in the bass here pretty clearly. And screaming up top is this high G. You also hear this E flat. So this is what I hear. And I also hear this B flat. Let's listen again. Oh, and just for fun, I opened up an auto-tune here on this track, and I bypassed it, so it's not doing anything to the recording, but we can see what it detects from the recording. So you can see at the top of the rev range, you know, it's about, you know, it's at a D sharp E flat, which confirms what we hear. So to recap, we hear an E flat, right, and it's this one. And then we hear a B flat, and then another E flat, and then a G. So the first two notes here, the E flat and the B flat, make a fifth, and the B flat and the E flat above makes a fourth, and then the E flat and the G make a third. So, you know, what you're hearing is now if we translate these intervals back onto our keyboard in concert C, you get C, G, C, and E. And if you recall, G, C, E, these are the first three unique notes that appear in our harmonic series if we start with concert C. Remember, it goes C. So with the V10 engine, you know, you have all of the first 5 steps of the harmonic series. And you have 3 of music's most popular intervals. And you also have them arranged such that the intervals get smaller the higher you go. A fifth, a fourth, and then a third. And that's very balanced and is actually a guideline for composing music in general. So a lot of people say that the V10 sounds beautiful, and they're literally right. Sonically, it is beautiful. You know, it's musical, it's aesthetically pleasing. Come to think of it, that E flat that V10 screams down the straight right before it shifts, that note vibrates at a frequency of 311.13 hertz, or 311.13 times per second. Multiply that by 60 seconds per minute, and you get 18,667. Does that number sound familiar to you? If you brought Johann Sebastian Bach back to life and asked him which F1 engine sounded the best, he would pick the V10 too. The sound of the V10 is so balanced, you know, and its harmonic relationships hold true throughout its rev range. And I should say here that I'm not saying that all of these engine sounds are only made up of these few notes or these certain wavelengths. You know, that's not true. There's a lot more harmonic activity going on than just what I'm playing. But there are certain frequencies of the sound that stand out. They pop out and they're emphasized, that give to the character of the engine. And that's what we're listening for. So for those of you out there who prefer the sound of the V10, even over the V12, which itself is pretty freaking awesome, you might just be musically gifted. I think what I take away from this is there are structures in sound, or really anything in our natural world, that we are continually drawn to as a human race at a primal, even subconscious level. The love for that sound of the V10, that's not just nostalgia, it's real. This is what music is, how it was created from the earliest human cultures. There are certain relationships of harmony as a consequence of physics that humans have selected and extracted out of the chaos of our world, such that we have more information coming out of it rather than less. So you could say the V10 produces more musical information. And that is the human addiction, isn't it? It's an addiction to information, of order. Isn't that what music and art is in the end? The forever struggle against entropy. The ultimate defiance against a world falling apart. In other words, I would say the V10 is literally music to my ears.